And so there's what you can call a fructifying. It's sort of like putting in the sunlight, fruit in the sunlight, and how it ripens and ripens and ripens. So in a sense, the spirit goes to a place where the sunlight, shines upon it in the night, and ripens those unconscious interactions, so that the next day you can become awake to the new possibilities for interacting with the children. And that's true for all of your life, and it's exactly the same thing. Now, when you do that through birth, through death, and rebirth, you actually, the universe, in a whole universe, in a sense, is reorganized for you. So it's a lot more of a bigger, more cosmic event. But that's still happening to a certain degree in a less cosmic way each night. So that every day you wake up, you have the possibility of being awake to new possibilities of carrying out your destiny. And now we'll learn about this in more detail when we get into the theosophical element, because it's a very detailed picture. But that's the summary, But it's very detailed. At least Steiner's picture of it is very detailed, very detailed.
So sometimes the soul will go with the spirit in sleep?
You mean, no, it's not, the soul doesn't. We can say the fruits of the ego do, are what leave the body and the soul. The soul, in terms of body and soul, the least persistent is soul. Soul only comes into being, and this is something when we are incarnate, and soul fades away. Now this is difficult for some traditions because we talk about the soul, the psyche. Actually, we talk about the psyche, and then the word psyche has become the word soul, and that we have souls. Steiner would talk more about, our individualized spirit. We have spirit. We have individual constituted spirit. The soul is actually something that exists when spirit and body unite. Spirit and body unite, you have soul. And as we talk about theosophy, we'll see there's a soul, there's a realm right after death where all of that, all of the physical and all of the soul qualities shed. And all that's left is the kernel of spirit. And that's what enters into Devachan, what we would think normally is heaven, but a little bit different Devachan. Enters into Devachan and rebuilds a new existence. And so this is what we'll be talking about, really. The first four levels, the first three levels, physical body dies, the etheric body passes away, the astral passes away, and then we go through the soul realm. And the soul realm, all of the soul realms just passed away, it's shed. And Theosophy is a detailed description of how that happens. That's actually what we're studying, a detailed description of how this happens. Until all that's left is the soul kernel. What we could say is the essence of ourselves. And Steiner talks about each of us as a species. And so the expression of that species is each individual lifetime. You understand what I mean by that? Say you have the species of lions, and then you have all the individual expressions of that. Well, each of our lives are like individual expressions of who we are as this ego, this species body. Because the idea is that for each of the animal kingdom, there is an ego, which is the lion ego. It's only one. And they don't have an ego as individuals, but they are expression of the one ego, which is the ego of that species. We as individuals are in the same relationship with our own egos, but each of our lifetimes are the individual expressions. Does everybody follow that?
No, not exactly.
Well, I was asking because when I work with the children, I dream about them and I work on them in my sleep,
Yes.
as I do in my job. And they ask me for healings and I'll heal them.
Mm-hmm.
So that spirit allowing me to witness that?
Right. Well, and basically the image realm is in the soul realm.
It is, okay.
So
That's
you
what
are
I was-
experiencing in a sense, you're being informed about the spirit, and it's coming awake to you in your dream, which is the soul realm. So it's not an image realm, the spirit realm.
Mm-hmm.
So image realm is in the soul and physical. So it's like, for instance, there are people who, the people who do for a living, they tell people about what they saw in the spiritual world about them. They talk about relatives and things like that. You familiar with those kind of clairvoyants? Well, what they tell you about the spiritual world in the images has nothing to do with the spiritual world. But it is informed by what experience they may have in the spiritual world. But there's not like individuals, and there's not, the things they're not ghosts, and there's not all this, there's these images they provide for you are an interpretation out of their constitution of the spiritual world. It's not that they haven't made contact with the spiritual world, it's just that the only way to articulate that here is in a way that is not really a picture. It's kind of the same thing I talked earlier. It's like I talk about there being atoms, but that's not what's out there.
It's the best metaphor we can come up with.
Exactly. So but it's an important thing to know that we are constituting the message when we give it about the spiritual world. We are constituting the message that we got about the children, in the spiritual world, and that is in the soul. That's a quality of soul.
But the soul's not thinking. Got it.
The definitions, I spent time in the reading on his definition of soul and his definition of spirit, because they are different than definitions I've worked with before, especially in Christian thought or in thinking history of ancient Israel, the systems of thought.
Yeah.
So I really did need to spend some time with that. And so some of what you're saying, I accept that I'm not going to really get it right now, but that's all going to add to my picture of what Steiner and Goethe's definition of soul and spirit were.
Right. And remember, as I've said, and Steiner says in this reading, work with your feeling perception of it and see what uniquely comes up for you in response. Understanding exactly Steiner's definition of soul is not the important thing. The important thing is that unavoidably you will have a response in your soul to it.
And that is why?
Because that's your vehicle, that's your window to whatever knowledge uniquely for you should arise, that then can be the gift that you then give back. It's the feeling perception. Sometimes that's why I say the thought part to last. Because the thought part, as we do thought, will get in the way, and you have to really be careful looking for what we call thoughting. There's a difference between thoughting and thinking. Thinking is happening all the time. Thinking is the creative process of the world. Thinking is just things going on.
Thoughting is like the process of articulating it and sort of hardening it by articulating it.
So in these classes, I'm always trying to be careful to work against thoughting and to understand that my thoughts, Steiner's thoughts, those are only the shares, those are only things that you can get a feeling quality from. And then you work with the feeling quality by, as Steiner would say later on, doing the 3 fire trials to see what's really there. And that will serve you and others.
Okay.
You said fire, water, and what was the other one?
Air.
Air.
And those are in Higher Worlds and Entertainment. He talks about those 3 trials. He'll talk about them in the next chapter. He won't use those names, but he'll be describing those, at least the fire and water trial, in the next chapter.
I'd approach this reading a little bit like reading knitting directions. Sometimes you read the directions for knitting that has a new technique or a new challenge or a complicated method of construction, and you really don't get it. But you read it several times, and then as you start to do it, and then you reread, like what you've done makes the reading make more sense, and then you just keep going back and forth. So I kind of let myself off the hook and thought it will be kind of the
And
same.
that's the process. You read it the first time, you get a little bit of a feeling.
And just
You do
kinda-
something in the wheel. You do something in the wheel, and then the thinking emerges. And it's your thinking then. You know, it's not actually the thinking that you didn't understand necessarily what Steiner was saying, but you got a feeling perception, you did something in the wheel, and then something emerges from you.
So this makes
your
me feel
thinking.
better about the class, and bummed that I'm going to miss those 2 classes, but
Right.
I have to go do music stuff.
And like I said, I'm doing this so I can post these,
Okay.
and so you can at least get the benefit of this part of the conversation, and the rest of it, what the activities we do will be in text,
Okay.
you know, each time, and you can do those exercises and stuff like that.